Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is African Americans and the Census of 2000. And we're fortunate to have with us a geographer from Tennessee State University, Dr. DPadgett, who is a professor in the Department of History, Geography, and Political Science, to talk about the African American and the Census of 2000. And of course, Dr. Padgett, let me welcome you to the show this morning, and to tell you how delighted we are to have you with us, Dr. Padgett, because we've talked about the Census 2000 on a number of occasions, and we feel that you now can bring us the information of the results in a real sense of what we talked about earlier, and that is the outcome of some of these statements dealing with the census. But before we get into that, Dr. Padgett, let's have you to give our audience some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important that eventually led you into geography and eventually led you to Tennessee State University in the Department of History, Geography, and Political Science. And then we'll talk about the Census of 2000.
Yeah, well, I began my education at the undergraduate level at Western Kentucky University, and I started out as an environmental engineering major, but things changed and I wound up majoring in geography. And of course, being a geographer, one of the main areas is the study of population and demographics and the census. These are some of the core areas of the discipline of geography. After graduating from there, I went to work for the federal government. I worked at Oak Ridge National Lab. I worked for the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. And then I went on to graduate school at the University of Florida, where I continued my studies primarily in geography and environmental engineering. And so during that time, I've always had to use environmental data, especially when looking at environmental justice issues, to see what sectors of the population are being impacted, or low income or minority groups being impacted by pollution. Also, I own a consulting firm, and I've used census data and economic data to look at the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data for banks, and looked at areas that have been underserved by banks, where people, especially people of color, have not been fairly treated with regard to home loans. And so you have to use census data, census tract maps, in order to show those disparities. And so it's been something I've done all throughout my career, is use census data to look at all aspects of life.
And so what we'd like to do today, Dr. Padgett, within that framework, is to have you to talk about the Census of 2000. I think that you've got a lot of information relative to some of the trends, some of the developments in reference to that. And what we'd like to do during this first segment, as well as the second segment, is to simply give you free rein to talk about this as a topic, and to sort of give us what you believe to be the most important elements that have come out of this census of 2000, dealing specifically with the African American population, and of course how that might relate to other members of society, other populations as well. But from that perspective, let's talk about it from there.
Okay. Well, the census, this year's census is going to be somewhat different. One of the big changes is in ethnic identification. We used to have 6 general racial categories: black, white, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, Asia-Pacific Islander, etc. But now there are 63 different racial categorizations. And you still have the same 6 main racial categories, but now people who responded to the census were able to choose from among 63 various racial categorizations, and they were able to choose more than one. And there's some concern amongst the African American community that that's going to cut into our representation with regard to voting districts and congressional representation, because there are some people of African descent who might feel that, well, I'm more Native American and African American, or I'm maybe African American European, or what have you. And so there was a movement in front, especially in California, to push black people to check black and nothing else on that census, because there was a fear that we'd lose representation.
Well, in looking at the African American representation, and you say that these